Hi, it's Emily, Kid Lit Book Love, here to talk to you finally about my November and December book reads. I am doing December now. I never had a chance to film November because I was in the Caribbean and in Florida for a couple of weeks traveling, and Christmas, and before that Thanksgiving, so I'm a little behind. So let's start with my December children's literature book reads and reviews. And of course, we're going to start with what I reread every year, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. This is the Puff and Chalk edition, and it was written, the first one, in 1843, I believe, the first printing. And the Puff and Chalk are very nice. So they're light, they're airy, they have a really neat chalk design, and I have a few others. I think I have Peter Pan and Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. So of course, at the time when this was written, it was written for children and families, but now it's as much as I love it, it's much heavier reading I would say you'd have to be a young adult to read, appreciate, and understand fully A Christmas Carol. Just saying. Loved that book. And I generally don't do picture books, but this book, Santa's Snow Cat, belonged to my son, who is now 18, and we saved all of his Christmas books. I reread this, and after years of not reading it, and I love it. I've always loved it. I love cats, I love Christmas, I love snow. It's a beautiful book, and the illustrations are beautiful by Ann Mortimer. And it's really about this beautiful fluffy white snow cat who is Santa's cat and gets separated from him during his deliveries on Christmas. And she goes on this journey to try to find him. She ends up in Paris. You see a little bit of Notre Dame there. She ends up in New York and I don't know, various places. She sees different Santas on trees and malls, on the TV, and she keeps thinking she's found him, and she's disappointed to learn there are so many Santas in the world, and she thinks she's never going to find her beloved owner. And I'm a cat person, so I love this story. She finds this little Santa ornament here, snuggles with it because she misses him, and in the end, of course, they are happily reunited. But this is a beautiful book story, very nice writing, just for fun. I reread it and just wanted to share with you for a small child, or just if you love cats. I really loved this book, which is funny. And I don't generally review the children's younger literature. Okay, I did read The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus by L. Frank Baum, published in 1902. I did a separate book review for this just a few minutes ago. I will post it separately. And I will talk all about this particular version, but I'd never read it before. This was a wonderful story. So check out that video that I made. And even more exciting, I want to show you what I read from my December book called The Snow Queen and Other Tales. Beautiful book. And The Snow Queen was written in 1844 by Hans Christian Andersen, who of course also wrote The Little Mermaid, which I'm going to talk about. And I only read The Snow Queen. I did not read all of the stories. That would take far too long. There are no illustrations in the book. It's a very heavy, large book of fairy tales. But The Snow Queen is all about good versus evil, and about a little girl named Gerda and her childhood friend Kai. And Kai gets sort of put under this dark spell and is taken away by the Snow Queen. And Gerda goes on a hunt for him. It's a child quest story. She goes looking for him, traveling the world, and she gets enchanted by a sorceress, and all these things happen, and finally they're reunited, and only her love can break the spell. But what I love about this story is, well, two things. One thing I didn't love is when they are finally reunited and they go back home to their grandmother, or the woman who was raising them. They're adults suddenly, and the grandmother is long past, and they lost their whole childhood. So there's some interesting underlying themes to look at in this story. But Hans Christian Andersen is the most brilliant scenery writer. And so I'll talk about that when I talk about The Little Mermaid. But you just feel like you are literally crunching in the snow in Scandinavia or in Antarctica when you read this. The description of the weather, the sounds, the textures of all things winter, the scents, the smells of winter, the animals. It's just brilliant. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful story. I really love this book. It's from Barnes & Noble. It was just released in November something. I got it on December 1st. So I also read by Joan Walsh England, A Christmas Book. And you may recognize her for doing these beautiful figurines. I talk about some of her other books and her art in one of my other videos. This is a vintage book, written in 1983, I believe it is. And I found it on eBay, and it's just a nice accumulation, 1981, a nice accumulation of her stories, poems. It actually had a few recipes. I love the story, the doll and the teddy bear, who never have been adopted because they're always on the top shelf at the toy store, and they long for children and a family, and they finally get adopted. It's a really cute story, and it has just some really nice poems, and mostly I love Joan Walsh Anglin for her art, and I have some of my mom's Joan Walsh Anglin figurines and collectible plates. So this was really a beautiful picture book, and I keep it with my Christmas books every year and bring it out. So, and you can find a copy on eBay for fairly inexpensive. There were quite a few. So I wanted to also show you what I read this other book, which I packed away with my Christmas things, so I can't show you, so I did a printout. It's Everything I Need to Know About Christmas I Learned from a Little Golden Book. And if you remember the golden books, they've been around since the 20s, I guess. I don't know, forever and ever. But this is an adult book you can buy in the Christmas section. It's only a couple of years old, and it's more for adults, and what it is, well, and you can read it to children, of course, but I think it's more like a collectible book, but it's really an accumulation of a selection of many different golden book art pages from other golden books that the author puts together in her own story. So she writes her own story about everything wonderful you need to know about Christmas, and then she'll have a one page from an old golden book. It'll say on the bottom, from Mother's Little Hen, 1947, and then, whatever. Each page says which golden book it's from, the year, the author, and it was so much fun looking at this, just seeing all of the old golden books and all of the Christmas scenes from some really vintage ones versus the most modern ones. So, and this is by Diane Muldrow. She has a few others. Everything I Need to Know About, I think it was like Life, I learned from a little golden book. Very neat series. I definitely recommend checking that out. And as far as December, those were pretty much... Oh, I did read this, which is not related to Christmas, but I was talking about Hans Christian Andersen. I read, and this is a printout of the PDF story you can find on Google, The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen, which was written in 1872. I always want to make sure I get the year right, because there are so many books and stories to get the year right. But everything you think you know about The Little Mermaid from Disney, keep your an open mind, and you would be very surprised to read this story. It's absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And I had never read this story, ever. And I'm a huge Disney fan. So, first of all, there are no names. There's no Ariel and Eric and Triton. There are no specific names. There's the Little Mermaid. There's her sister, the oldest sister, the second oldest, the third oldest, and there's the Sea Witch. And they just say the prince. There's no name. But it is not a happy ending. There is no happy ending for the Little Mermaid. She doesn't marry the prince and live happily ever after. It's actually a little bit of a gothic fairy tale, which is very typical. A little bit of darkness for the Grimm's fairy tales and Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales from the 1800s. So she actually, and there's a lot of controversy over some of his stories, this one in particular, because it really degrades women and their role of lack of importance compared to men or boys. For example, she's referred to by the prince later on when she's living with him as his dumb little foundling, my stupid little treasure. So, specific writing about that several times in the story. And even the description, they talk about the castle of the Sea King having Gothic windows and Gothic structure. So there's a big sense of the Gothic in this. A lot of focus on royalty, and Ariel, not Disney, the Little Mermaid. At the end, she has an opportunity. The prince doesn't marry her. He marries someone else, which isn't the Sea Witch in disguise. It's just someone else. And so the only way she could live after making the deal with the Sea Witch is if she married him, and he didn't marry her. So the Sea Witch says, okay, you put a dagger through his heart and kill him, I'll let you go back to the sea instead of becoming sea foam and death. But she chooses to throw the dagger overboard and sacrifice herself to hell, an eternity, and for the sake of the prince, so he can live. And she also has her tongue cut out in this story. There's no magical taking of her voice by the sea witch like you see in The Little Mermaid by Disney. And so, but I have to say that this has the most beautiful description of the ocean world and the natural world. Hans Christian Andersen, next to Ellen Montgomery, who wrote Anne of Green Gables, I'd say he is my absolute favorite imagery setting writer. I mean, you just are there. You're just there. When he's writing about wherever the setting is, you're there. Perfect example. Outside the castle, there was a beautiful garden in which grew bright red and dark blue flowers and blossoms like flames of fire. The fruit glittered like gold, and the leaves and stems waved to and fro continually. The earth itself was the finest sand, but blue as the flame of burning sulfur. Over everything lay peculiar blue radiance, as if it were surrounded by the air from above, through which the blue sky shone instead of the murky depths of the sea. In calm weather the sun could be seen, looking like a purple flower, with the light streaming in, glittering from the calyx. Each of the young princesses tended lovingly to their beautiful own gardens. And so, I mean, he just writes about the underwater world in such a gorgeous way. I absolutely love it. The whole sky looked like gold, while violet and rose-colored clouds, which she could not describe, floated over her, and still more rapidly than the clouds flew a large flock of wild swans, glittering, gleaming, flapping towards the setting sun to freedom, looking like a long white veil shooting across the sea. So, you know, at the end, she ends up getting taken away by the winds of eternity, where if she does certain good deeds, she'll... I don't know. I mean, it was very good versus evil, obvious morality lesson to children reading the story at the time. If you do good deeds, you'll go to heaven. You do bad deeds, you're going to suffer in hell like The Little Mermaid does. So, brilliant story. Just go on Google and do The Little Mermaid, Hans Christian Andersen PDF, print it out and read it. I loved it. I loved it. I'm actually including that in my children's literature project. Thank you for watching my December book reads, and keep the eye out also right after this if you haven't already seen it for my November book reads. Thank you very much.